System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Wednesday, March 11th. I am Amin TMK alongside Amoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Amoja, hello. Happy Wednesday. How you doing?
11,584,100,000 sunk in. Just again, according to the official Pentagon statistics of what this war is costing, which does not at all take into account anything that we've lost as far as any of the strikes Iran has done to any of the bases in the area. How do I feel? Destroyed by fucking debt.
All right. Well, you're not the only one. How about that? So just enjoy that your time. The United States is deeply in debt. They've been spending a lot of money. They've been doing a lot of things. But unfortunately, every single time we get on this broadcast, or fortunately, I guess, for much of the global South and probably us, the United States is getting a butt whoop, man, all across the Middle East. Bahrain, major strikes. I think they just hit another oil refinery. I think we can talk a little bit about that. UAE bases gone, destroyed, blown. Israel taking massive strikes. Well, again, we're going to talk more about that. Basically, right now, Iran has just taken a great amount of the United States' military power off of the region of the Middle East. And I would say that it's not looking good if you are a fan of Donald Trump and what he's doing. Let's discuss because the press secretary, guys, she has been working quite hard. Let's take a listen right here.
The president said yesterday for the first time that he had to strike Iran because he believes that Iran was going to strike U.S. targets within 7 days. And then he bumped that down later to 3 days. Where is he getting that?
Well, that's not the first time the president has said that he chose to launch Operation Epic Fury because he felt as though Iran was going to strike the United States and our assets in the region first. Again, I addressed this in the last briefing. This was a feeling the president had based on facts provided to him by his top negotiators who had been engaged with the Iranian regime in a good faith effort. The Iranian regime was lying, deceiving the United States of America, clearly trying to continue their nuclear program to create a bomb that would, of course, threaten the United States of America. Again, their ballistic missile arsenal, they were rapidly and aggressively increasing that by the month to a place where they would essentially build immunity for themselves, where a future president or President Trump would not be able to launch this incredibly successful operation. And so the president, again, as I have reiterated and he has said, was not going to sit back and allow the Iranian regime to threaten or to attack the United States of America any longer.
Tanky, he only attacked because he thought he was going to be attacked. So again, this is not about him. This is about what Iran was going to do. And I don't know if you heard him earlier today. He was saying that he didn't really confer with a lot of generals. He was conferring with Jared Kushner and a lot of people around him. Now, here we are. Obviously, the American media and the American public wants to know what the heck is going on. And Donald Trump doesn't have much other than, well, we had to attack because if we didn't attack, they were going to attack. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so, man, you know how you can tell when someone is lying is when they start talking hella fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't give us one casus belly. It was like 8. She just kept going. Just keep flying them out there. They lying to us in the debates. Well, I mean, not Jared Kushner, who was the other one? Steve Witkoff. His problem with the Iranians was he said they were too honest. They came out, they said they had 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. That sounds like the fucking truth, right? So were they lying or were they, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what happens when the war is not going the way you want it to go. Now, I want to avoid excess sensationalism because you're going to find that everywhere. I don't want you to get that here at Inner City Left. I wouldn't say the United States is getting their butt kicked. I would say this. they're getting hit back hard, and they're not an enemy. They're not used to having enemies hit them. You know what I'm saying? At all. They're used to decapitation strikes. Fly in, wham, bam, overwhelm you with the magnificence of our capacity for destruction, leave your leaders dead, leave the military infrastructure dead, and, what's left of the political leadership, they're expecting them to reach out, begging, please, dear Lord of the empire, please end your epic fury, right? That did not happen. The first part did. They went in. The first day, they were able to hit the 86-year-old Ayatollah who apparently was at his house doing Ramadan with his family. We've already talked about that on his family on this podcast. So, those were not hard goals to accomplish, and the United States did accomplish them. But that's not what they stated their goals were. The stated goals were to remove the nuclear capacity, which, I don't know if anyone not in Iran, and very few people in Iran, have any idea where the uranium is. No one knows. No one outside of the Iran knows. So that has not been accomplished. The regime has not fallen. The thing about these big bureaucracies, and anybody that's studied Iran for any period of time understands, this is a government, this is a culture that was a literal humanity leader in organizational theories, right? The Iranian style of bureaucracies was so efficient that even Alexander the Great, thousands of fucking years ago, when he conquered Persia, just kept using their government system. It's damn, this is actually really efficient, right? So you can't believe that one person tumbles down a house of cards. It's just not the way Iran has ever been. Maybe under the Shah, but he's gone. He's in the United States with his kids, getting that Mossad money. The rest of the Iranian government is just not that way. It's resilient, and they've shown that. Again, we should have had a strong idea that this is kind of what would happen after President Raisi was lost in a helicopter accident. And again, I'm still going to say lost under the most tenuous circumstances. That government, again, in under 6 months, had another presidential election. Again, there's a government with a population of 90 million people in 6 months, organized a national election, and that's how we ended up with President Pezeshkian. Now, I find it interesting. We haven't seen him in almost 2 weeks, but at the same time, we haven't seen Bibi either, right? Those guys are, with the tenor of what's happening, once you know that they're trying to do decapitation strikes, they're reasonably tucked away. But that doesn't mean there haven't been losses. Again, we hear on the American side how they got the Ayatollah. What you haven't heard a lot of on the news is Ben Gvir was also got. They tried to spin it oh, he was in an accident. But the Iranians already said they had targeted him. They hit his house with a missile. We know that Ido Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu's brother, has been popped. There are rumors that Smotrich's son was deeply damaged in an attack in northern Israel, attacking Lebanon and the Hezbollah forces. Right? There's losses all over, but I do find it interesting that CNN has been able to touch ground and broadcast everything they saw in Iran. Meanwhile, there's incredible informational security that's happening with everything associated with Israel. Everything that you see, you're finding it on the internet, but you're not seeing it on Paramount. You're not seeing it on CNN, except for when they're out there talking and the missile just happens to go down and they try to pan the camera away, right? America is so deeply out of interceptors because 3 THAADs have been damaged, 2 radars completely destroyed. These are priceless artifacts. I could put a price on what they cost to build, but that's not the price it'll cost to make them again. And there's no guarantee that the governments that were hosting them will automatically give sanction for that. Like, we've lost a lot more than people, right? And we still don't even know how many people we got. Because what was the story they said about the last guy, the so-called eighth guy? He had he died of a medical condition. Like, what the fuck?
It was a mental health incident that he lost his life. And tragic, like you say, a lot of times.
How do you lose your health to a mental health?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how. Yeah, mental health. His mental health, man, it just went down and then he died. Maybe it was a broken heart. Maybe he broke up with his girlfriend and, it was just a mental health situation. But it definitely was not any of the Iranian military. That's for sure. Speaking of, this is what I'm looking for. I'm sorry, is this one it? Yeah, that one's it. This is from Reuters. Reuters, exclusive. As many as 150 U.S. troops wounded so far in Iran war, sources say. Now, of course, we've heard from the Iranian government that over 900 American military or servicemen have been killed. And it depends, because this is all about the spin cycle of a war. You have to show that you're winning the war. But this is Reuters, so this is a low number. Okay, this has got to be a low estimate if it's coming from such a major news organization like this. But I don't think that there's any doubt that more than 3 have been killed, because that's the number that they want to use. But this is 150 troops wounded. Again, if you look at the destruction that is being had at these bases, if you look at the before and after, Richard Minhurst did a really good video on that, of the before and after of the Iranian strikes, and significant amount of these installations, like I said, in Bahrain, in UAE, they have been obliterated. They have been hit majorly. And to your point, like the THAAD systems, no matter what happens if this war stops, or there is an armistice, or whatever that may be, which I don't think that there is going to be for a while, that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to rebuild. And that counter you've been using, which is such a great way to look at this war too, just in terms of money and all the things that we can't buy here in America. We can't do student loan debt. We can't end homelessness. We can't end medical debt and have single payer health care. We can't do any of that. But of course, we can have $11 billion so far on the war, 150 people injured, possibly more. I would say more. But, what do we know? We just study this every single day. Do you want to keep the hits going with Carol? Wasn't it Carol Levitt? Is that her name? I can't know, the press secretary. She was doing a lot of work
100%.
She was doing a lot of work today, man. So I don't know if you heard about this. Maybe you can talk to us about this. Donald Trump was trying to discuss why the Iranian school, of all girls school, where 185 young girls lost their lives, hit with a Tomahawk missile. But maybe, Tanky, maybe it wasn't America's Tomahawk missile.
On the Iranian school, why did President Trump say yesterday that Iran may have Tomahawk missiles when there are only 3 other U.S. allies plus the U.S. that have those missiles, and therefore could...
Look, again, the President said yesterday he will accept the conclusion of this investigation by the Department of War. I know there's been a lot of speculation in the media about who may be responsible for this. We're not going to get ahead of the Department of War and the conclusion of that investigation. The President has a right to share his opinions with the American public, but he has said he'll accept the conclusion of that investigation. And frankly, we're not going to be harassed by the New York Times, who's been putting out a lot of articles on this, making claims that have just not been verified by the Department of War, to quickly wrap up this investigation because the New York Times is calling on us to do so.
Yeah, I always say things like Donald Biden. You remember when Joe Biden was sitting with Bibi Netanyahu, and they were talking about the first hospital that was hit after October 7th. And he was like, it was the other team.
Yeah. More than 20 hospitals. More than 20 hospitals have been hit in Iran just in the past week. So I guess it was the other team again. Look, Carol Levitt is a trip, man. She's a trip. Sitting there with her little Jeebus chain on, lying for her Messiah. The fact of the matter is, it's just ridiculous. It hasn't been verified by the Department of War. Well, I guess that means it's not fucking true. But the fact of the matter is, there are only 3 nations in the world that have Tomahawks, to wit, Britain, the United States, and Israel. Turkey might also have some they may host from time to time. But the thing about it is, who fired it is irrelevant, because all Tomahawks, it's not like a gun where you press a trigger and then boom, out goes a bullet over this way. It's a weapon that has to be programmed. The whole programming of that weapon, the telemetry, all of that is in a computer somewhere. It's a 5-second Department of War investigation. Yes, we did it. Oh, let's report that, right? But again, why is there any? This is the latest, greatest version of we've investigated ourselves. We found ourselves not guilty. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't get it. These are the same guys that step out. You know what I'm saying? Mr. Hegseth, fresh from the gym in a 6-pack, after benching 890 pounds, sitting on top of a gorilla.
315. It was 315 pounds, okay? That's an enormous amount. That is a college linebacker amount of strength, my friend. But don't try to joke with him and make it funny.
I mean, if we gonna lie, let's just push it all the way up, man. Spider-Man was on there. A ton.
Mark Henry was there
as his spotter.
The Rock was giving him a lot of Bautista.
I mean, this is the same dude that's coming out saying, I don't know why any Iranian feels like they're gonna live. Like, that's the shit you said. That's what you said less than a week ago. Just say it with your fucking chest out. Yeah, we did it. And it's going to be more to fucking come. Unless when we said unconditional surrender, we wasn't fucking around. Like, be that man. Be that man all the time. Like, you did it. Like, just own it. Like, who are you lying to? The American people?
Yeah.
Either they believe it or don't. The Iranians don't have any question as to who did it.
That's the thing. I think about this all the time. I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan. And in the last Mortal Kombat, one of the big sort of contentious points is, Shao Kahn. He's talking to Raiden. He's like, why are you lying to your people about what's going on here? You don't tell them that there's a tournament that could change their lives. You're not telling them. You're trying to keep them in the dark. He's like trying to figure out why Raiden is doing this. And, Raiden is like, well, we still have to maintain, peace. We still have to maintain the veil that this is not real. And I think that's the issue with the American government right now. They're sort of doing a double dutch right now. Do we just say it with our chests, pants off, in your face, whatever, deal with it? Or do we have to sort of answer to like the idea of what, Press Secretary Leavitt was saying, which is, we got to investigate. We got to figure out whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing. They're still playing this game, even though they know that there is no casus belli. There is now. Iran was gonna attack us, so we had to attack them, even though we know that their military buildup was specifically because Iran was constantly being targeted, and we all knew this war was going to happen. Bro, how long have we been talking about Iran was going to get attacked? And they knew it. Everyone knew it. And of course, they had to build up their ballistic missile system.
So if you knew the Iranians were going to attack, do you think they were going to attack more powerfully than they did? Right? So what we saw was a pretty strong attack. It's clearly something the United States can survive, right? So why not allow that to happen, right? If you believe, like, you secretly just move all the troops out, you move the naval vessels out to sea, like we did with Pearl Harbor, which we still try to act like, oh my God, we had no idea, right? Though it's a matter of history that the Americans knew and moved the important assets out. Why not just do that? Why not just let Iran attack? Because then you have the casus belli for whatever, fuck it, nuke them, right? Like, this president would do that. And please understand when we say we're not being alarmist. Should the pace of this continue and the United States finds themselves out of smart munitions, should they find themselves completely out of interceptors, should Israel get to a place where they just for their own sake of ego, feel like they're not going to take this anymore, you know, there is a much stronger chance of a nuclear response than there has been in our lifetime. Like, you have to take that as seriously as it is, right? So, like, since we know that this is probably where this is heading, because the United States cannot suffer the losses that would be incurred from a ground operation, and they haven't really seemed to be able to sucker anybody else to sacrifice themselves, right? The UAE, everyone like, oh, why doesn't Qatar and UAE declare war? Because they'd be fucking annihilated. Like, they have no chance. The only nation, from a numbers point of view, that would be able to put up a decent fight against Iran would probably be Saudi Arabia. And the problem with that is most of Saudi Arabia's forces are mercenary. Almost all of UAE's forces are mercenary. Qatar has no real military worthy of mentioning, right? So these are countries that cannot, of their own volition, make war with Iran. Iran is just stronger. It has a more cohesive culture, right? UAE ultimately is kind of a construct. It didn't exist 150 years ago, right? These are just the things that were created by the Americans, the British, and the French with the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, which only happened in World War I. Meanwhile, as I said earlier, Iran, by way of Persia, is older than the Roman Empire. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's an ancient society. They're gonna be there. The only way you can break their will ultimately, and especially with the demands that we're hearing now are coming from the Iranian side as to what it looks like to end this conflict. We have no doubt the Americans have consistently been trying to reach out. The Americans reached out to Italy, were rebuffed by the Iranians. Trump has recently called Putin. I mean, the irony of that. And let's be honest, Putin is going to be rebuffed too. Putin's ass is on the line in this in many ways because Putin went on record of telling the Iranians they had nothing to fear, that the Israelis were no longer interested in military conflict. That happened less than a year ago. Putin came to the Iranians and told them that. So they made ass out of his name. And at the end of the day, it still goes back to that kind of white supremacist thought, well, let's get to powerful white people talking and we can settle this. This shit in Iran is not going to stop until they decide it's going to stop. You know? Now, again, maybe that requires from the United States or the Israelis, in their estimation, the utilization of a nuclear weapon. But other than that, I do not see a conventional way for the Americans or the Israelis to achieve the goals that they have done. And even in that scenario, it will still take the Iranians deciding, okay, we're done. Because the elephant in the room in all of this is, according to the government, we have been told as Americans, there's 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that no one knows where the hell it is. And Bibi's been telling us for, 30 years now. They're a week away. What happens when we find ourselves in this terrible scenario where there is an exchange? Because there could quite possibly be an exchange. And this is not being alarmist. This is being just playing out all the scenarios the way that it goes. Because Iran has shown no willingness to relent or resist. And when people say things like, oh, they're using less missiles, that's only because they've achieved saturation. You don't need to keep firing 400 missiles a night when you know that the interception rates are gone. They're hitting exactly what they want to hit. And they have not fired a rocket with less than a 1-ton warhead in less than 3 days. Everything they're sending now is the big stuff. They've gotten rid of the old stocks.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's been all these different AI implementations, whether it's Anthropic. Anthropic, I think, is the one now that is like the biggest part of like the U.S. military. I know that Claude had sort of pulled out. I'm not an expert on this. Maybe we can bring, Keita on and maybe she can help us with it. But we do know that AI is implemented, and we do know that AI constantly has to, when they do these war games, say, nuke them. Just nuke them. And, there is no way to move forward in this war other than capitulating to the Iranians, which I think hold a significant amount of cards. And Donald Trump loves to talk about cards. Okay, well, they got plenty of cards in their hand right now. Got maybe got some jacks and queens and kings and maybe an ace up their sleeve. We don't know. But we do know that let's talk about this. Let's talk about this, bro, because we really haven't gone too far into this. And I think that is because we have a situation where there's just a media blackout. That's just what happens, especially when it comes to the Israelis and the things that they're doing. I usually don't post stuff like this, but this is from Breakthrough News. I think they're a very reputable news source. Despite Israeli government strict wartime censorship and media blackout, video leaked from Tel Aviv shows devastating destruction inflicted from Iranian missiles. Let's take a look here, my friend. For our podcast listeners, major fires, cars completely exploded, dust and debris all over Tel Aviv. This is happening all over Israel right now. I don't have numbers on injured. I don't have numbers on how many Israelis dead. We do know many have fled. We do know they have hit major officials, like you said, Ben Gvir. A major part of the Israeli government over the last decade plus. Smotrich, I know you said, I think it was his brother or something like that. So these are major hits. And if you go by what the United States believes is proper military engagement, then you believe that they like to decapitation strikes matter because that's what the West believes, and that's what they go after. So if you even use it by the West's metric, they're doing quite well. Israel is, I don't know, maybe you can give us some context on what's happening in Israel right now. I know this is just one video, but have you been seeing more of this and what's happening in Israel in terms of these missiles? I know you talked about some of the interceptors. They used to have like 5 or 10 minutes. Now they're down to like 90 seconds. What's the vibe over there?
So this goes back to what I was talking about, whereas they only are using their most powerful warheads now. You know what I'm saying? If you can think about what a ton of high explosive does, right? Coming down at Mach 7 to Mach 10, like just the physics of that alone are devastating. That is a lot of kinetic energy, and that is the result. Now, when people look at this and they see all of these buildings blown up, this is the thing that you have to acknowledge. Every accusation is a confession. When the West talks about human shields, especially when Israel talks about human shields, the thing to understand about Israel, and this is just a fact, it is a culture, it is cities built on a fortress, right? All these underground tunnels they talk about with Hamas, maybe that exists, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's overblown, maybe it's underblown, but what we know for a fact is tunnels exist all throughout Israel. On the top, on the ground, you see that's where the cities are. That's where the skyscrapers are, blah. Under the ground, you have military bunkers, you have personnel, you have, all of the different entities that exist as the war operations of Israel. You know what I'm saying? So the ground is really just their turtle shell. But under that shell is where the military operations happen. This is just a fact. This is known all throughout the Middle East. So when they're hitting these military bunkers, it's impossible to even get there except firing into deeply populated cities. But I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is, who the hell is any American to say anything to the Iranians about the way that they do war? When we started off the war killing an 86-year-old religious leader and 170 children, girls that are not in the military at all. We've lost any human rights argument that we could begin to make against the ways that the Iranians do war. And this is just objectively fact. If you're going to be blowing up hospitals and children in schools, you don't then get to complain that, oh my God, the enemy is doing it too. That's just, don't be a liberal.
Yeah, don't be a liberal. That's a good way to look at it. And it's not just, Israel that's getting hit. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I do want to mention this because, the United States uses these Gulf countries as, like they're just little vassal states that do exactly what the United States says. And that type of stuff gets you in a lot of trouble. And this is something that I think the Iranians know. They know that at the end of the day, they are going to have to contend with the puppet governments of the United States. And this is something that they're going to push back against. This is another report on Bahrain's. This is their oil installation or whatever. Iranian strikes force Bahrain's Babco to invoke force majeure. Maybe you can explain to me what exactly that means. But what it says here is in commercial contracts, parties generally assume that obligations will be performed as agreed. However, extraordinary circumstances may arise and make performance impossible or extremely difficult. To address such contingencies, contracts often include a force majeure clause, which I don't know if I'm saying that right. Maybe you can help me out. You have a fancy MFA degree. A legal mechanism that protects parties when unforeseen events disrupt their ability to fulfill contractual duties. Babco looks like they take it. Babco, your time has come. I just I want you to maybe talk a little bit about this because we've been talking about the unrest in Bahrain and it just continues and continues and continues. We had some reports that maybe the leader of Bahrain left. I know he's back now.
Oh, they're gone. No. They're gone. Yeah, no, the royal house. They're all hiding in Egypt right now. Most of the royal houses, like you haven't seen really anybody from the House of Saud, all of these little Gulf monarchies, they're all hiding the fuck out because they don't have the will of their people. The will of their people has for a long time been extremely pro-Palestinian. And how were they able to stop this? They were able to stop this because the little militaries they had, they utilized pretty much as secret police to beat down the people and to arrest anyone that pushed too hard for any type of resistance against Israel. That's why these countries were in a state of essentially de facto, de jure recognition and normalization with Israel. You know what I'm saying? Like the American bases there existed to prop up these monarchies. That must be said. And these are the places where no one ever starts talking that democracy shit. Yeah, and again, don't be a liberal. Do not believe the Americans ever wage a single war about democracy. They win. They want elections when they know their man is going to win. You know what I'm saying? That's just the bottom line. They know there's not a single person they could run in a place like Bahrain. There's not a single person they could run in a place like UAE where the actual people would vote for the American puppet. And so you have something much more maintainable, a monarchy. Because of that, though, these are not strong rulers. When this shit hits the fan, they get the fuck. These guys are rich, like super rich. Would you stay in a house that's being bombed? No, not if you could afford it. And so that's what's happening. Meanwhile, their people are suffering because, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, huge oil and natural gas exporters. But you know what they are? Huge food importers. It's the fucking desert. Shit don't grow out there. So the same way where no oil is going out, no food is going in. Now, think about what that situation is going to be like in another week, in another 2 weeks. These populations that watched their monarchs allow the Gazans to be starved will now start to be starved. This is real imperial boomerang. You know what I'm saying? And the longer this goes on, the more dangerous it gets for those monarchs. Because how can you come back? In the middle of all of this. These are where the United States just were incredibly short-sighted. So that brings us to force majeure, however it's pronounced. It's a French word. It goes back to a Latin concept of like an act of God. Because even though international law does not exist in war anymore, fuck it, hit a hospital if you want to, hit a school. International law absolutely matters in terms of business, right? these countries have obligations. They have corporate international obligations to meet certain thresholds of natural gas, of gasoline, of petroleum products, and that stuff is not going out. So what they're doing is they're utilizing a legal mechanism that essentially is like an act of God, like if a tornado or a hurricane, right? They're treating this war as an act of God, something that they didn't have no control over, which we can argue if they did or didn't. They definitely couldn't have stayed the hand of the Americans. How about that? And because of essentially very little fault of their own, they're not able to make their contractual agreements, you know? And who that hurts? Again, we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast. It'll hurt America eventually. It'll cause inflation. Economically, there's huge damage that probably dwarfs the $11,608,550,000 that we've spent so far. Probably dwarfed, right? The economic impact of the loss of trust in the American markets, as far as the petroleum futures and bond markets, that's going to be much, much greater, you know? And they're trying to cover themselves because these governments are going to sue everybody to try to recoup this money. So that's that's those countries already trying to get out in front of this, saying you cannot blame us for the economic downturn that is inevitable the longer this stretches out.
1 month ago, my friend, 1 month to the day, Wednesday, February 11th. You want to know what the stock price for the Dow Jones was? Remember? Do you remember?
50,000.
50 G's, baby.
Why are we talking about Operation Epstein's Fury?
Why? When we're
over 50,000. All right, so where we at now, Dana?
Ago. That was 1 month
50
ago.
50 G's, Dana.
Well, I can't. Unfortunately, I don't have the capping ability of Dana White. I have to tell the truth. But at 50,000, we are now, after, of course, the 400 points that the Dow lost just today, we are now at 47,374.95. So
I guess we can talk about the Epstein
maybe
files.
we're allowed to talk about it. And this is the last thing I just want to say, because this has been something that we've been saying, and just in general, I think the Global South is saying, Epstein class. And the White House, they released a briefing about it today, or the Wall Street Journal. So might as well be the government. But the Wall Street Journal basically was like, they're using Epstein class as sort of like, I think they use like a propaganda term or whatever. But I think it's so fitting, because at the end of the day, these are the people who are running the American government. They are all through the Epstein files. The tendrils exist and permeate throughout the entire U.S. Congress and the entire U.S. government apparatus. The celebrities, the politicians, the billionaires, all there, right there for you to see. And here we are starting a war of choice on it on. Another girls' school was hit today. We're going to continue to move on that. But, and this is just the thing of like.
Tomahawks do the Iranians have?
Do they got a lot? It's just unbelievable. The lies are so ridiculous, bro. Like I know you be trying to be as professional as you can, but like it's tough when the lies are just so unrealistic, man. I mean, you might as well say that there's a double agent, a guy who's a Pete Hegseth clone right now. Like, I mean, it's just, it's crazy, bro.
Just put your dick on the table. Yeah, we did it. Just do it. You did it. Say it. You're not afraid. Fuck all that woke shit. Say you did it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Now they want to be woke. I don't know who done it.
Investigation, New York Times, and do one. Yeah, man. And like, they're losing, dude. Like, look, I'm just saying they're losing in terms of what their plan was. Their plan was regime change in Iran. That ain't happening. Iran is
failing to meet your goals.
They're failing to meet their goals. Let's just leave it at that.
Their stated goals.
Exactly, their stated goals. Stock price is down. What are we gonna do, man? What's gonna happen? Let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts for now. Apple and Spotify, but always check us on our Podbean, podbean.com/InnerCityLeft, or I think that's it. I'll try to leave the link in the description. Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins right behind me. Amoja's poetry book. Get out there, reading a very talented, exacting writer. And you support us, of course. You can always do that by liking and subscribing and leaving us a nice comment if you're on our Spotify, or if you're on a Spotify or Apple or whatever your podcast is. Like, subscribe here on YouTube, patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. Amin TMK, everywhere you find music. Lil Tanky, everywhere you find music. InnerCityLeft.com. I think that's it. Tanky, man, this is what we do. This is what we talk about. And we are in the heat of it. We're in the thick of it. Maybe a paradigm shift happening, in the world right now is sort of the world is dying for a multipolarity instead of the Western unipolarity. Thoughts, feelings, what do we miss? Close this out, man.
Excuse me. If this is going to be a short war, ask yourself why your congressperson, all just made it a lot easier to be automatically and voluntarily registered for the draft. Why do the Americans think a draft is about to happen, that we're about to need a draft? If it's going to be a short war, if it's going 15 out of 10, as we're being told, why are they making it easier to be drafted? And why isn't your congressman fighting against that tooth and nail?
Now is the time to get way more political. Now is the time. For Amoja, Lil Tanky, Sumler, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.